On behalf of the Louisiana Center for the Book in the State Library of Louisiana, thank you for joining us for this virtual 2021 Louisiana Book Festival presentation.
This program is Taxicab Tales, Fact and Fiction, with Lee Durkee and Dege Legg. Lee Durkee is the author of the novels Rides of the Midway and The Last Taxi Driver. His work has appeared in Harper's Magazine, The Sun, The Best of the Oxford American, Zoetrope, Lit Hub, Mississippi Noir, and other places. In April 2022, Scribner will publish Stalking Shakespeare, a memoir about his obsession with trying to find lost portraits of Will Shakespeare. Dege Legg is a Grammy-nominated musician, an artist, and award-winning writer from Louisiana. In addition to authoring 3 books, his music has appeared in film, handpicked by Tarantino for the Django Unchained official soundtrack, TV for Discovery Channel, Netflix, and National Geographic, and radio on NPR. He currently tours the U.S. and Europe with his band Brother Dege and the Brethren. Ladies and gentlemen, Lee Durkee and Dege Legg.
All right.
I suppose this is where we get going right now, if we heard our instructions correctly.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, let me start just because I'm such a big fan of yours. I've read your book over the last week when I was on the road doing road stat jobs, standing by the side of roads, collecting stats on seatbelt use and stuff in New England. And wow. I'd go home and I'd read, and I dreaded it would be like going back to work and I wouldn't enjoy your book. But there's a wall between that. I'm not in the cab. I'm just reading about it. And I thought you wrote the best book I've ever read about driving a cab by far, and just enjoyed it tremendously. So first of all, congratulations, Dege. I'm a fan. It's an excellent book. Beautiful, poetic, just moving, funny, everything right about it. It just strikes all the right notes, and it conveys the experience 100-fold. And so congratulations. And I listened to your music last night. Thanks. And was equally impressed. So I'm really happy to be here and honored. And I'm just going to throw out a few questions because I find you much more interesting than I find myself. And I figure the people listening will agree. So how long did you drive a cab? And I'm curious also if you were an independent contractor or you had a union. And is your cab company still going, or did it go under?
Those are good questions. I did it for 5 years, 2003 to 2008. I really did need a job. I didn't do it as an art project, although I went into it as kind of like, this is going to be good stuff to write about, having already kind of, done a lot of writing by that time. I was an independent contractor. The cab company has their own fleet of cabs, like 12 to 15 cabs on the road at a time. There was no union. And yes, the cab company is City Cab Company, also known as Dixie Cab Company, is still in business. I'm still friends with the boss, who's in the book. He's the only character that's under his real name because he's such a sweet guy. But, Joe, shout out to Joe Youssef, but super good guy. He was a good boss. Only almost fired me once or twice, so.
Yeah, and it leaves good notes too.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure. I reread the book the other day, or parts of it, and yeah, there's a employee. There's a language disconnect in there because he's from Jordan or Palestine, and yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad they're still in business. Did you drive during when Uber was coming into the game, or was this pre-Uber or?
Pre-Uber, it was not even a thing. It was still the Wild West then, which was totally cash-based. There was no credit card machines.
Right.
People were still using flip cell phones. It was pre-smartphone, really. And so you didn't know who you were getting in the cab. There was less accountability from the customer because you didn't have their bank information as you do with Uber and stuff like that. So people were way less well behaved, I mean, I've talked to Uber drivers now and they tell me stories how crazy it is and stuff like that. But it was really crazy back then. Like, as I go into in the book, I gotten in physical fights. I'm not even a fighter guy, but you get in so many confrontations with other people, and a gun pulled on me at one point in my face. You know, it's wow.
What was your ultimate record as a fighter, as a cab driver?
Record? You mean
About
like how
5
many
and
did I
0,
win or
right?
lose? I think I won 1 or
Oh, you
2.
won.
And even when you win, you don't feel that great. I didn't have any, I felt guilty about it, and I just thought about it for the next 3 days, like analyzed what was happening there. How could I have handled that differently? You know, but you know, as I said in the book, there was a crack addict lady that actually hit me in the head one time. It was wild. It was such a crazy job. It was fun too. For the first year, it was a blast. Second year was still fun. I was getting in the groove, and then I had it wired. So years 2, 3, and 4 kind of had it wired. By the last year I was doing it, I was pretty burnt out, and that's reflected in the book. And you know, about how, like, okay, I think I'm coming to the end of the road, pun intended, on this, you know, cab driving job stuff. So, but
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah, you work exclusively night shift, or do you ever dabble in day shift? Because I was a day shift driver, and that's a
oh,
different. I got fired from night shift almost immediately because of Old Miss frat boys. I just couldn't deal with them at night, so I
they're
got relegated to the day shift. And I liked the day shift. It made me, at the end of the day, I felt like I was contributing to my community. I mean, it wasn't an easy job, and I was ill suited for it personality wise, but I liked it at the end of the day.
yeah.
And I felt like I was contributing to my town more than I was as a teacher in some ways. I'd done some teaching.
Yeah, because you're physically moving about and kind of interacting with people, helping them out during the day. I did do both. I was 99%, 98% night driver, and 2%. I jumped to the day shift a couple times when they needed me. You know, they'd say, "Hey, can you come work the day shift on this thing?" And I was so shocked at how different it was. It really is like when the sun goes down, it's party time. People are
Right.
getting inebriated, they're looking for drugs. They do a little bit of drug searching during the day, but it really goes down at night. You know, the bars open and all that stuff. So I was shocked how mellow it was during the day. I was like, yeah, this is way more tolerable. The thing I didn't like about the day shift, though, and you'll probably understand this, is the traffic annoyed me. I was like, oh my God, I'm sitting in
I
this
was going to
cab
ask.
where the air conditioning, you know, on the majority of the cabs was half-assed. So I kind of like the wildness of the night shift to a certain extent, and the kind of free flow of traffic where it wasn't too crazy, you know.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to ask you about, because your book has a lot of rage in it, but it doesn't have a lot of road rage in it. You
Yeah,
know, I don't see you going insane under traffic lights and stuff. And that was my daily life. The traffic broke me down every day.
I did
And
do some of that. I kept some of the road rage out, but yeah, I get it. Like, it really tests your patience. Just the people test your patience. You know, I was telling a buddy of mine last night how just, you know, how your energy is reflected in other people and vice versa. And you really get a sense of that in the cab, where on a really busy night, on a full 12-hour shift, you're picking up 30 to 40 people in a night, and every 10 to 15 minutes, the scene changes and it's a different vibe or frequency. And if I'm in a bad mood, sometimes that brings out their bad mood, vice versa. It's just not to get too new age on you, but I was like fascinated by how much my energy kind of spilt over on other people, and theirs did mine, and would kind of mess up my night and stuff like that. So it was a lesson in maintaining some boundaries, you know, or trying to get better at doing that.
did you ever feel like, as a driver, I got this as a bartender too. Sometimes you feel like you're watching this kind of improvised performance art. Like you have two people in the back seat and they're having this conversation knowing you're overhearing them, right?
Yeah.
Do you get the feeling that there's a lot of, the people are performing for you as a driver on some level?
That's a good point. You know what? I didn't think about that too much, because at night, people are less, in my experience on the night shift, they're a lot of them were drunk, you know, or drinking or something like that, or tired because they're off of work, or they're working a night shift of their own at some Kentucky Fried Chicken or someplace like that. So I didn't witness as much of that, unless it was maybe the frat boy kind of element where they're kind of puffing up and maybe some guy in my same demographical age range too, like where we're kind of fighting and just kind of feeling each other out, you know. But that's a good point, but I kind of took people for what they were at the time.
I was just always aware that they were aware of me listening. And, you know, I saw you have an interest in quantum physics. I read your website and had your interest, right? And quantum physics says we don't exist without being observed, right?
Yeah, like the Heisenberg
right?
principle. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And they know they're being observed and they're affected by that. And I always felt like, even with the racism, I felt that, and I don't know how much racism you dealt with. I dealt with it. I was driving the night Trump became president. Wow. And even the racism felt like performance art to me with the frat boys back there. You know?
Yeah, I think people use some of those social cues as a means of bonding, to finding other people of a like. They're assuming that you're of a similar like mind. So maybe, I don't know. But I did experience, definitely there's a lot of racist elements in here, as there is probably all over the country. The South definitely gets a bad rap about it. But yeah, there were some pretty intolerable moments where people were assholes, you know, of all races too, you know. And so, yeah, I went through I looked up your bio and a couple articles on your book, and how, yeah, man, like I think you mentioned Mississippi's 50th out of 50. So Louisiana's in there too. It's like, you know, education level and per capita income. So you're dealing with a certain element of the population that's slightly maybe less educated or had a worse education, or, you know, so you have to factor all that into your interactions. And it's sometimes really sad.
Yeah, I was shocked at the amount of racism. I mean, I didn't consider myself naive when I started driving a cab, but I was. I learned more as a cab driver than any other job I've had, far more than bartending, and I've bartended forever.
Wow.
And in terms of the racism, I had no idea those Ole Miss students were as racist as they are. The Ole Miss frat boys, they couldn't wait to trot out the N word for me. Wow. You know, and like you said, they project their weaknesses, their prejudices and perversities onto their driver, a cab driver. If they're perverts, they assume you're a pervert too.
Yeah.
That's odd. To me, it was a learning experience, and I could not think of a better job for a writer than driving a cab. Can you? Hey.
Totally. Like, I'll read, like, you know, having done the job, like you're buried in reality of other people's lives, you know, from the single mother that's trying to go cash a check to pay her light bill, to with her teenage son in the cab, to, you know, the drunk businessman that, you know, it's a $50 cab ride and he's tipping you at less than $1, or once it's, you know, just all kind of stuff. Like you really, it erases a lot of your illusions about people, and then reconfirms a lot of your hopeful suspicions that people are good-hearted, you know, and there's a lot of those out there. But it's sometimes harder to see that side of humanity in the quick 15-minute interactions of a cab, you know, in that little window. It's a little sometimes harder to bring to witness the soul and the kindness of another human being, where it's a lot easier to witness maybe the negative reactions, which seems to be like more common verbiage, or just sociological interaction, you know, where people complain together, and they complain about something as a means of bonding or venting. You're a cab driver too. I can see how you being learning more about humanity as a cab driver, because you're an encapsulated object, whereas in a bar you've got all this other extraneous noise, ambient noise going on, so it's harder to have a serious conversation unless it's maybe later in the night or earlier in the night.
Right.
But it's like a therapy session with select passengers at times, you know. And
highly confessional too, right?
Totally. Like, they feel comfortable. What I notice is a lot of people, they feel comfortable in letting out certain things because they don't know you don't know them. And if they're having a problem with their spouse or kids or something, I mean, I witnessed a lot of, you know, housewives or guys, you know, frustrated over their state of their marriage or something like that, and they're trying to process it, and you're doing it with them. I've actually enjoyed those interactions because I learned something from them rather than just, some mundane conversation about sports or the weather or something like that,
You talked about how there's inspiring people too, and your book has those listed. There are inspiring customers. The woman you picked up who's taking her son out play, from the projects at Geta, and she's taking her 14-year-old son to bowling alley, and she's tipping you, and you're trying not to take the tip. There's the janitor who has just such an amazingly good outlook on his job and life, even though he's, has what would be considered a shit job. I took a kid to his first day at Walmart once, and the whole drive there, he was so excited. He actually, and this is not exaggerating, he was saying, this is a dream come true for me. All my life, I've dreamed about working at Walmart. And you think about that, and I was like, are you kidding? I didn't say anything. I'm a pretty cynical person. But you do get people like that who have amazingly good attitudes. Like, I could not wait to get to work at Walmart.
Right. They're just excited about little things, and it makes you feel a little kind of bourgeois and guilty about your own preoccupations and your own, I'm not respected as a writer and artist, or I'm being neglected and all these things. And it really levels the playing field of your expectations of your own personal goals, because you see how much other crap individuals are dealing with in their personal lives, addictions and all these other things. And you're this voyeur in that bubble, and I totally get it. Yeah. Like, I wrote the book in the present tense. So it's kind of like the reader is in there with me. It's happening in the moment. I'm not telling it past tense. We're in there together, and I kind of disappear. We were talking about, I forget. I did a version of the book that was a little bit more me in there. I'm in there in the beginning, and then I kind of disappear about midway through, or I'm in there, but I'm not talking about my personal stuff so much, because I thought the more I injected myself into the book, the more boring it got to me to write. It's just, I was so fascinated with all the passengers and all the kookiness. And there was a lot of redundancy too that I cut out, where it was just the same drunk people doing the same thing, like over and over again. But there were I really tried to balance it with the authentic interactions, like the two people you just mentioned, which is the janitor guy, which is a chapter called Table for One. And, those would blow me away. I was genuinely like, those would give me hope. I was like, wow, it would reset the scales on my own bullshit, to be concise with that,
Yeah. And you need those customers. I mean, we were both driving 12-hour shifts, right?
Yeah.
Like 70 hours a week. And day shift, as you know, you get regular customers, and you're getting them to work on time. And that can be really stressful, because they can get fired if you're late, and if your dispatcher sucks, which mine invariably did, you get backed up 5 or 6 rides, right? But those people became my friends, because I don't, you're working 70 hours a week. You don't have a social life. That's it. You have those inspiring customers, and you look forward to them every day. And I still miss some of my customers,
The regulars are fascinating. I mean, when you do this job, as you'll notice, like, there's a cast of characters in the regulars, in the transient people that you pick up and you never see again, in the other drivers who are fascinating, kooky individuals as well. There were many of those guys that were trips, and the dispatchers. We had Bud. There's a girl named Robin. Shout out to Robin if she ever sees it. She still works there. One of my dispatchers. They still call me by my number when I go by and visit. Which is number 4. What's up, number 4? So, yeah, like the whole, I don't know what the other drivers were like at your company, but there were some fascinating individuals. And I go into that a little bit in my book, but they're funny, man.
Yeah, they have some good stories too.
It's definitely a certain personality type that gravitates toward it, which we probably both have in us, but we're also like writers and artists in some way. So we're mining it for a creative experience as well. But the guys that just default into that, like, they're definitely some antisocial characters, in some way.
Yeah. Guys who have never had vacation, never had a banking account, checking account, credit card, anything like that. And you know what? As soon as my both cab companies I worked for went belly up, they're gone. And because Uber came into town, and those guys, I wonder what becomes of them. You know, what are they doing now? You know, maybe driving for Uber. I hope not. But in some ways, once you're an independent contractor, it's not really that big a difference.
Yeah, totally. I think
So-
it's like a safer bet now, and it's obviously streamlined. It was like, yeah, there's a lot of the cab drivers, it was a cash business. So, you know, sometimes you could pick up a shift and just go pay your light bill and whatever else you needed to, you know. We
So
got
you
paid.
were like me. You had a kitty next to you, you know, with your money in it, and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can be robbed of that at any moment. And
I'd take my money and I'd have hiding places. Once it got over like $50, I'd stash it somewhere as in a sock or another
Right,
part of the cab, you
in the
know.
trunk, whatever.
Right. There was all kind of tricks, you know. And a lot of the other drivers would tell me, you know, like they give you advice on all that stuff. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I got a pet peeve, and this might not mean anything to you, but if it does, I'd like to talk about it a bit. Like,
okay.
I'm about to turn 60 tomorrow, and I've been trying to be a writer, you know, since I was about 18, 17. And in my life, I've seen the whole writing community overtaken by these MFA programs. Now, every writer I know teaches in an MFA program, Masters of Fine Arts.
Uh-huh.
You know, they have creative writing programs. They come into your town. Every college has one now. And it's almost as if every writer in America is a teacher.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, 1/3 of Americans are earning their livings as independent contractors now. I read the other day, 1/3. Where are the writers? I mean, there's you, there's me.
Yeah.
Who are the other writers that are representing this 1/3 of America? You know?
Good call, man. I know it's like, I went to college too, and I studied a lot of writing classes, and I was ready to get out. So I got a degree in philosophy, but it was either creative writing or philosophy, and philosophy had the least amount of credits I needed to graduate because I was ready to get out. I even thought about going back to college. I still think about it now, like doing a master's program, but I knew I just wanted to go. I was too much of a pirate, you know. I was like, I could see there was a kind of sterility in the academic life. You know, just even reading other people's literature, not to be critical of it, but I was like, these people haven't lived enough in some ways to be writing interesting stories that are entertaining me, at least at this point. I really gravitate toward kind of outsider, real life stuff. So I lost my train of thought, but academia, I was just kind of over it and I was done with it. And I'm not saying I'll never go back to school. It'd be a lot of years to go back, but something turned me off about it. I wanted to just dive headfirst into life, which I'd already been doing, but cab driving was another version of that. You know, it's just another journey. And I knew that I was going to write about it when I first started doing it, you know, but I didn't know it was going to be a book. I didn't know if there'd be enough material for a book. Yeah,
it's not an easy thing to write about. And you can look, there's not that many good. Have you found any good books about cab driving? You come upon any?
You know what? When I first started doing the cab, I was blogging a little online, like on MySpace when that was around. And somebody sent me a link, and there was some guy in New York that had written a book, similar kind of thing, but I haven't read a lot of them. I haven't read any of them, actually. You know, I'd love to read yours as well, but there's something that gets, I don't know. It's a tricky job. Like you have to, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question, but to write about anything, man, you really have to kind of, especially a job like that, disengage yourself or you have to be into it, you know? You have to be invested in some kind of way. I don't know. It was a good, and you know, for a practical sense too, like I needed the money. I needed a job. Like I didn't have any other kind of safety net, you know, go work at my dad's factory or whatever, or nothing like that, which, you know, I didn't have any of that. So I needed to do it. And part of, for me, surviving it, the survival mechanism, which I've always used in my personal life, is just, I like to do creative things. Some people like to go fishing. Some people like to go skydiving, But me just playing in the sandbox of creativity has always just kind of helped me traffic through whatever I was experiencing, good, bad, whatever. So I'm like really grateful that, the gods, the universe, or whoever gave me something like a survival mechanism like that has allowed me to kind of tolerate things, to be honest.
Yeah, you do have more tolerance than I do. I was reading as a driver, you had more tolerance, and but also you would hit a point where you would make bad decisions, like the whole thing where you were trying to time the guy took your cell phone and then went to his house with his father. Man, that could have ended up. You could have been killed
Totally
that night.
I mean, yeah, I was an asshole many times in there, and I tried to illustrate like that. I'm not like a hero to the whole book. I have my moments where there's authentic interaction, but God, I was, there's many moments where I was pissed off and just really just disgruntled and burnt out on humanity, and that made me bummed out about myself. And just, I think you went through that too in your tenure driving a cab. There's something that, that just burns you out. I can relate to how cops get burnt out on the job because they're dealing with a lot of similar problems, way more extreme than maybe what we did, but we're definitely in that same aquarium of dysfunction.
Yeah, and yet they don't like us for some reason. Like the cops,
I don't know why that is.
We're getting drunks home, man. We're making their job easier.
We're making our. I totally saw that too. I thought, like I even mentioned in the book, I thought there was going to be some kind of brotherly camaraderie between the other guys working on, having to work the streets. And nope, they did not like us. They were not cool sometimes, really, like petty as well. Like, hey, you can't park right here. Hey, but man, I'm right here sitting out front waiting for a passenger to come out, or I'm in between calls. Nope, you got to go. I'm going to write you a ticket if you don't. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. I was like, wow, not cool.
Nah, I mean, they need us, and I didn't understand that attitude at all. Also, they were in charge of inspecting our cabs and stuff like that. The local cops were. Did you ever have to go through the inspection process with your vehicle?
They did, but I didn't have to do that personally. Usually the cab company handled that or something, all that stuff. But yeah, they were all old cop cars that were bought at auction, Crown Victoria, Crown Vics,
Yeah, you had Crown Vics? Okay.
Yeah.
They were all Crown Vics. So in a sense, like one thing you didn't have that I didn't have, I had the same car every day. I had a town car, 95 town car. And as long as I drove my 70 hours a week, I got to keep the car at my house. So I was allowed to take it to the grocery. It was I didn't have a car myself. I was trying to save up for a car because then instead of splitting the drop 50-50 at the end of the week, if you have your own car, you get 90% of the take, was the way it worked in my cab company.
Okay.
So it was a big difference. But
so you leased the town car from the cab company? Is that how it works?
Well, I mean, my cab company's called Angel Taxi, and it had about, I would guess, 9 beat up cars. I mean, it was not an organized thing. It was the oldest cab company in town. It had been around for 20 years, but it was ramshackle. Yeah. And I had the only sedan. So every time there was an old person, I would have to go get them and stuff like that. And I became really fond of my car. That was like life took place in that car. And quitting that job, man, leaving that car behind was hard. I was very fond of that car. And you didn't quite get that experience because you got there early every day to pick out the best car. And so you had different ones.
Different ones, correct. And there is some drivers that had assigned cabs. Like they were usually veteran drivers that had been doing it 10 years and longer and had established themselves as exceptional drivers. They keep it clean. So Joe, the boss, would assign them a cab, guys that were really dependable. Not like I wasn't dependable, but I was newer. I was a younger gun in the game, and any new driver, they don't want to put a new driver in the nicest cab because that creates jealousy among the other drivers too. There's a lot of infighting at our cab company, at least, where, man, they would, the cab drivers like the older guys, or the veteran drivers like the good cabs, and they would usually get those assigned to them. And the newer guys would get the crappy cabs with the windows that wouldn't roll up, or
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
the air conditioner wouldn't work and stuff like that. So I
The
never
seats
got
won't adjust, so you have to like drive all the time under somebody else's adjusted seating. It's
Yeah,
awful.
yeah. I'll tell you what, though, I could jump at a Crown Vic right now and just not, it would not miss a beat because I spent so much time in it. The geometry of the steering wheel and where everything's at, I can still picture it in my mind like it was yesterday, even though it was over a decade ago, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I'm still fond of sedans now. I didn't really care about cars that much before I started driving a cab. I became really fond of cars. I like them better than most people now. I like
Yeah, you
cars.
you develop a relationship with each cab, like just even the handling of it, you know, the braking and like cornering, and it's like being kind of a race car driver. Like you're dependent upon how well this cab runs, if the transmission's slipping, all these little things. So you learn to dance with it, you know?
Yeah, very true. And of course, the public has no idea how bad your brakes are, how bad the cars, how thin your tread is, how much you have to beg, grovel just to get brakes that work, anything to function in that car. It's
Totally. I mean, I went into a couple episodes where the cabs broke down. There was more than one episode. There was a few, probably half a dozen, but there was some redundancy in each story where they just cabs overheating in late summer, you know, August which is usually when they break down. And, you know, man, they try to get into the cab stand. So you make this mad dash back to where the cab stands are and switch out the cab. And that was always a challenge too, you know, like that things start smoking and it's the valves are rattling and oh my God, it was crazy.
Yeah. I'm a fan of a musician named Jim White. I don't know if you know him. He was a cab driver in New York City for a while. He went on to um, put out a few good albums. And one of his lyrics said that I know there's times that the blind must lead the blind, right?
Yeah.
And that hit a note with me in terms of driving a cab. And I thought about it again literally in terms of my experience as a cab driver dealing with blind people and the experiences you conveyed in your book dealing with blind people. And I wondered if you wanted to talk about that experience in that chapter for a
Sure.
moment.
Yeah, wasn't sure where you were going with that, but yeah, there's a school for the blind in town, and I guess they have a relationship with the cab company, so they call the cab company a lot to give these blind students rides who are range in age from like 18 to maybe mid 30s. And one night I got a call to pick up at a local pizza place, and you know, said it's a couple people go pick them up, and they're blind. So I was like, okay. I go in, honk outside. They don't come out. I go inside. They're drunk. There's two empty pitchers of beer, maybe three. And I have to kind of guide them. They're drunkenly with their canes too. They walk with canes and stuff like that. They didn't have seeing eye dogs, and nonetheless, but yeah, that was a memorable episode where I had to kind of navigate them toward the cab, get them in there. And then I kind of immediately, once we start rolling to their destination, I forgot that they're blind and they're drunk. So a lot of people get motion sickness. I don't get it, so I'm kind of oblivious to that. So I'm driving at the normal kind of high-paced volume that I do when I'm normally working, and both of them, or one of them, started puking in the cab, the female, and just spat like white puke all over the cab, and it was nasty. And I had to pull over and let her finish, and then get them home, and then clean up the cab. And yeah, I think the name of that chapter was "And the Blind Shall Puke."
Yes, it was. Yeah. Um,
True story.
yeah, and there's that moment where everything's dark inside and you turn the light on and realize, oh yeah, they don't. You turn it back off and leave.
Right before I'm leaving, I actually went in their house, helped them get in, and then I kind of borrowed some paper towels. I went outside, cleaned the cab, and I'm leaving. They're both passed out on the sofas, kind of like this, and I'm like, okay, you know, kick the light on, and like, wait, they're blind. They'll just turn it back off, and quietly let myself out.
Yeah, we had a my cab company had a contract with a local hospital. And so anytime anybody was being kicked out of the hospital for inability to pay, and these were old people dying, we would pick them up and take them back to wherever they lived in North Mississippi, usually out in the Delta. And it would be their last cab drive, their last car drive. These people were on their way out.
Yeah.
And we'd pick them up. And first thing I'd do is I'd like gauge to whether I could physically lift them out of the cab if I had to. And if I couldn't, I would have to reject them, because a lot of them can't get, they can't get out of the cab and they're dying. And you take them to their deathbed, and that was part of our job every day. We got paid mileage both ways, so that was good. But it was just a sobering job that way. People
Yeah,
coming
that's
out
heartbreaking. I picked up a lot of handicapped people, and you'd have to help them in and out of the cab, put their wheelchair in the trunk. I mean, that was a common thing, and there was one guy, he was in a wheelchair leaving the hospital, and he had both legs amputated at the knee. He'd recently, I guess he had some form of diabetes, and he just recently had the other leg amputated. So I got him in a cab, and then they didn't let me put the wheelchair in the back, in the trunk. And I'm like, okay, why? And this belongs to the hospital. So I put it in drive. I'm driving. I'm like, how am I going to get this guy into his house? Of course, he had his own wheelchair at his house, but those mechanics of those things, helping people in and out, that's pretty common, Like
he's taking people, being a poor man's ambulance too, because
totally
ambulance sets you back like what, $7,000 or something in real life. People call cabs, take me to the hospital. You have people bleeding and wrapped up in bandages, and you take them to the emergency room all the time.
I had an episode like that where a guy got beat up by some teenagers, like a homeless guy, and some people in the neighborhood witnessed it. And rather than call an ambulance or the cops, they called the cab just to get him out of here, because I guess the guy was sort of recuperating in their front yard or on the sidewalk nearby, and they just wanted it gone. So yeah, it's heartbreaking. It blows your mind sometimes, the variance between the most petty, not kind part of humanity, uncaring, to a ride or two later, 15 minutes later, you'll meet somebody that's got the biggest heart in the world and will do anything. It's just the variance between the two extremes in humanity you'll see in like short periods of time will just stretch your brain muscles to the point where
I must have been invited to 15 different churches.
Yeah.
That happened to you? But that might be a day shift thing, and I took a lot of people to church too on Sundays. So
you know what? It was not.
No,
this is the difference between day shift and night shift. Night shift, not so much church going, but would you be interested in come do some drugs with me in this apartment or something like that? There was more of that, like there was a lot of crack abuse and alcohol. I mean, there's an episode where this old man on Christmas Eve night insisted that I drink with him. I became his drinking partner, and I was totally sober, but sipping a little bit just to kind of keep him happy and put it up. But like I gave him a ride way out to the country. His cousin or somebody wasn't there, so we had to drive all the way back. And on the way back, he just kind of defaulted me into his party buddy for the night, and then insisted I come in. It was Christmas Eve, so I actually went in his house, and he's an old Cajun man, and they really want you to come in. So yeah, less church, more party.
Yeah, and only got invited to church by black women. No white person ever invited me to church.
They're so sweet. I mean, like I had somebody tell me in the cab that I can't remember where I heard this, but like maybe it was another driver. He goes, out of all the people you're going to meet, the people with the biggest hearts, African-American women.
Yep.
You're not going to beat them. I was like, wow, okay, and you know what? A lot of that turned out to be really true. Like,
yeah,
it
was my experience. Yeah.
How long did you drive a cab for?
I drove a cab for my first company for a year, and that was one where I got fired from night shift and had to work day shift for a year. And then I just couldn't make any money at the day shift anymore because Uber came into town. And so I started driving for another cab company for another year called Flying Tuck. And they had these little, they had this great idea that we'd be in like these little golf cart type things had carriages in the back, carry 4 people. It was the most dangerous vehicle ever allowed legally on the road. I mean, if you got hit, it would go into your leg. And but it was profitable. So I made enough money doing that, and I hated it because it was night shift and I had to drive bar clothes every night. But I made enough money to buy my own car finally.
Yeah.
So then I started driving Uber and getting my own clientele to go to airport runs in Memphis, which is an hour and 20 minutes away.
Yep.
And that's how I was making my living, doing airport runs until COVID hit.
Airport.
So I've been driving about 6-7 years now.
Yeah. Wow.
And
airport runs are definitely the good money runs. That's the top of the chain on the thing. Other than that, it's like maybe some guys getting off the bus here and there, or somebody going to a work site. But there's so many calls. It's not all high dollar calls. It's a lot of $5, $6 to and from some guy's girlfriend or hookup or their job or little chump change calls that eventually add up, hopefully. But man, I'll take an airport call over
definitely over a $5, because that was our standard fee, was $5. And the dispatcher is a driver with seniority. So he's sitting there in his car waiting for a 4-top, a 5-top, and he's giving me every $5 run, A lucrative comes and he takes it. So you hate your dispatchers in my company.
So there was definitely some nepotism or some insider trading going on between the dispatchers who are at our CAD company who were former drivers actually, but they were stationary in a place, but they would dole it out like here and there. They try to be fair and give everybody a good call, but there was definitely a lot of infighting amongst cab drivers of who got the good calls, like guys would get really pissed off,
Oh yeah, I was one of them. I hated my dispatcher, And
I heard that if you tip out the dispatcher now and then, throw them a 20, that'll help your call volume and your good calls. I started doing it. I didn't mention this in the book. It wasn't that interesting a thing, but I started sliding Bud, the dispatcher, a 20 now and then. I was like, I appreciate it, Bud. And he started feeding me good calls. So I got in on the insider trading.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I never did that, and maybe I should have. Switching the subject a little bit, since I read, your interest in light, and you listed UFOs as one of them, and that's something that comes into play on my book as well. And I was just wondering what you think of what you were thinking lately of the whole UFO experience, where they seem to be going through some sort of disclosure, where the government is admitting certain things. I was wondering, what do you think? What do you see the UFO? People seem interested in it all of a sudden, which is nice.
Yeah.
I wonder what your thoughts on the subject might be.
I could babble about this for like hours, so I'll try to keep it short. I think I've always had a childhood fascination with it. My dad was a pilot in the Air Force, he flew in Vietnam, stuff like that. So he was obsessed with it too. But
second generation.
Yeah. I think this is my personal opinion. I think it's a partial disclosure kind of, there's a name for it. I think they're trying to spoon feed it out into the public because they know it's kind of reaching critical mass. People suspect there's something out there for a long time. And maybe they're prepping the public for a full disclosure or just trying to control the narrative control the narrative so that people don't get too pissed off about all the possibly retro-engineered technology and black sector technology that's out there. They say it's like anywhere from 10 to 200 years ahead of us. I find all that stuff fascinating. Whether it's even true or not, I don't know. I'm not going to be like arguing with people about it, but I do find that kind of the unknown interesting, whether it be just the nature of reality. So that's a really kind of fantastical version of what could possibly be out there as far as alien life and UFOs and stuff like that. So I love reading those books, and I read, Stanton Freeman and all these other researchers, Linda Moulton Howe, and they're just great. I love it. Stephen Greer's book Disclosure. So
yeah, have you seen
Robert got
Hastings'
into it first?
documentary?
Say it again.
Robert Hastings has a documentary about UFOs at nuclear test sites or nuclear silos, and all these military men telling horrible stories about UFOs parked over
Uh-huh.
our nuclear silos, and how that's apparently happens quite frequently.
Yeah, that they
There's a great documentary about it called UFOs and Nukes.
I'll have to check that out because there's so much UFO material now, and some of it's a little hokey. And
Yes.
especially if you've been interested in this for a while, you kind of develop some discernment muscles. Okay, this is a little, flashy and exploitative, or whatever, or just kind of clickbaity. But I'd love to see that. I really like the kind of the whole exopolitics world of stuff. And man, it goes deep. Like when you've been reading this stuff for a while, which is how I got interested in it. I just love to read books. So I started reading nonfiction books on ufology, and I've read some crazy ones. I mean, it goes way out there. I don't know if any of the stuff is true, but people that are claiming they're communicating with aliens, and there's
Right.
122 different races out there, and they're actually describing each different race, the Nordics and the Greys and the Draco, and it's like a comic book. It's fascinating, even if you don't believe in it. I don't know why people would get upset if you're interested in that, like just like people kind of get proprietary over like, you're ridiculous looking at that stuff. It's like it's interesting to me. It's a form of abstract thought,
It's trying to figure out what you are as a human, really. And to me, it's very strange other people aren't interested. And I think that's a certain amount of cultural programming there. The fact that they're not interested is odd to me. And that I'm eccentric because I am interested in that.
Yeah,
I want to know what I am, right?
Totally.
And to know what I am, I got to know what they are, or if they are.
It's just intellectual curiosity. Like, we don't, I know they have theories of evolution and all these things, but there's a lot of stuff that's the jumps in the evolutionary chain that are kind of strange, like if you get into Eric von Donigan and Zachariah Sitchin and stuff like that, like,
oh, there you go. Yeah. That whole
the Anunnaki, like, it's like,
exactly.
there could be a form of creationism at work. It's
Right.
just not the traditional Christian form that people, generally believe in, who knows?
Right. I mean, the Sumerian supposedly myth that we were created by an alien race as a slave race in order to mine gold, which they needed to filter into their atmosphere so that they wouldn't be destroyed. It's odd,
I know. And there's all kind of correlations between, Anki and the original man and woman here that were hybrid with the aliens, like the Adam and Eve story. So there's this whole like you get into that stuff, it's pretty fascinating. And it's not like it's way more deeper than just some flat earth theory, it's like it takes a while to kind of get into it and digest. But this is a pretty interesting detour, man. People that are watching.
Sorry, man, I was out of cab questions. I saw you like UFOs.
There's a lot more of us than I think out there that are interested in this kind of stuff. But people are because there's such a stigma attached to anything conspiratorial within the last, definitely the last 4 or 5 years.
Right.
But that people are a little more hushed and quiet about discussing it. But when I meet guys like yourself or that have a commonality, they might be on the other side of the political spectrum, but we do have that in common. And then those conversations are pretty good. And it's great to compare notes with the other people that are privy to books that you haven't read. And, have you heard about, the Skywalker Ranch or something like that? It's something you may never heard of, which happens all the time. Like everybody goes to their own rabbit.
And I love how there's like our recorded history, and then there's this UFO mythology layered over it, where like every president is actually, Kennedy was shot because of UFOs, and it goes on and on and on.
Yeah,
and
you
don't really believe all of that, but it still becomes very interesting. There's a mythology around our history that is UFO driven, and
it goes so deep, man. It goes so deep, and then it gets into all the spiritual stuff too, and it's like, wow, man. So yeah, I love that rabbit hole. I love to read books. Like if I don't have a good book to read right now, I'm kind of like slightly bored. I love having something to come home to at night. I usually have 2 or 3 that I'm going through at a time, and I just love ingesting and learning new things. And what I wanted to mention too, just to get back on topic, your book, we both had the same idea about getting the color graphics of your book and my book. Like I was like, I want it to look like a cab. I want mine to be like yours is very similar territory. Like let's make them. I wanted to look like a bumblebee on the bookshelf in Barnes and Noble, where it catches your eye. You know, there was a mock-up that was done for the first version of this book, you know, when you're testing out covers, and the publisher submitted something that was like real dark and arty looking. I was like, no, you know, that's for my music, you know, but this I want to be plain Jane, real simple, easily graspable with the eye as you're walking through the bookstore. And I want it to look like a big bumblebee or a yellow cab sitting on there. I noticed yours was a similar territory. It's yellow, black, and red.
Yeah, yellow, black, and red. I get that on the paperback too. And I got lucky. We both got lucky with good-looking books because you know,
man.
You can.
I love your cover, man. That looks great.
Isn't it? Yeah, I worked with Tin House Press, and they were the best. Your book's
That's your publisher?
Yeah, Tin House.
Tell me about them.
Well, I mean, I hadn't published a book in 20 years when I got this finally published. I had really been on the ropes. And I got a new agent, and who kind of just saved my life, you know. And we wrote this book. He gave me a lot of advice how to write it. And then we sent it out, and we got a few offers. And some of them were much higher than the one we ended up taking, because the one we took was from Tin House Press. And he said, we need to take this, even though we got offered twice as much. We went with that, you know. It was a small offer. It was like $3,000. We talked him up to $5,000. And we signed with him. I trusted my agent, and it was the best experience of my life working with those people at Tin House. Couldn't have been better. They were smart. They know what they're doing. They market things well. You're not just a number with them. You know, it's not dealing with a corporation.
Yeah, I did a quick search on your book, man, and a lot of stuff came up right out of the gate. It's listed on, you know, Barnes and Noble, all these, like, so I'm like, that's awesome, man. I love hearing stories like that, especially somebody like yourself that's been doing this a long time. And it's a tough game, man, especially living in the Deep South, where we're not surrounded by like a gang of other writers, an infrastructure that's patting us on the back and getting accolades, man. We're out here in the jungle, dude. It's rough, and I love it, and I'm grateful for it. But our experiences are like true. It's there's something deep about being an artist in the Deep South, like in, you know, in some kind of remote area where you're not at the center of this infrastructure world, man.
No, I mean, there's a lot of caste behind our writing. You know, caste is coming to play lately and getting a lot more attention. And man, it permeates both of our books. I mean, our customers are mostly of a certain caste, although we get a variety, of course, but people without credit cards, people without cell phones, bank accounts, you know, I didn't even know these projects existed around my little gentrified town of Oxford, Mississippi. You know, but part of my job every morning would be go out to trailer parks, go out to projects, and bring all the people in to work who work in the restaurants. You know, and then they had you to take them back out at the end of the day, right? And so they have like a $20 bookend to their jobs that pay $9 an hour. And
yeah,
you know, you think about that, and if that's not part of your life, you don't think about that. And so it's a pretty sobering job in that respect.
How did you end up getting a book agent, which I've been curious about? But me coming from the music industry, I mean, I pursued writing and music at the same time, but I've got more experience kind of trying to get my music out there. And if getting a book agent is anything like the music industry, I just figured it was nearly impossible. So I haven't even bothered. I never written anybody because I was like, I don't know.
I gave up on it. I mean, I had an agent when I was young. And when you're young, you can get agents because everybody wants young writers. I mean, I'm about to be 60. A 60-year-old writer in America is a gut shot bear. You're not going to get published. Nobody wants to invest in you because you're already old and you're not pretty and your jacket photo doesn't look that good, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And also, you're not part of the MFA world, which is the world of connections, of grants, and you go to MFA conferences and you get introduced to agents and editors. You don't have those kind of connections if you're outside that world.
Right.
And I just got lucky. There's a wonderful writer named George Saunders, who's a friend of mine. And he recommended me to a young agent at ICM, and the young agent just called me up and became my friend. Dan Kirshen has just done everything he could to help my life. He's worked so hard on my work, and you don't hear those stories about agents really, in this world. And so I just got lucky. I shouldn't be in print at all.
And I mean, don't say that, man. Fantastic. I mean, it takes a lot of work to do a book. I mean, I think everybody's got a book in them, and I'm sure you'd possibly agree. But the discipline it takes to sit down, it's unhealthy. We're on these computers for 8 hours at a time. Like, it takes a lot of work to finish, to cut out all the fat and to see the flaws in your own writing and the stuff that you don't really need, with the help of an editor and a publisher and stuff. But it just to finish the thing, man. That's why not everybody does it. It's lifting 1,000 pounds over your head and holding it there for about a year.
Yeah.
Or more. 10 years, and then just dropping the weight. And
is there a equivalent in music? I mean, is anything in music as hard as writing, a book?
Like the music industry is what you're asking me?
No, just the act of creating. I mean, writing a novel, writing a novel-length, memoir, Cablog, that's incredible amount of work. You're playing without a net, and it could just be a complete failure. People kill themselves because of failed novels, right? I don't do that.
Yeah. They're kind of totally different beasts. Like, the music to me is more of it's almost like abstract art. It's daydreamy. There's different elements. There's a lyric element. There's the musical element. There's me working with other musicians and a production element. So it's kind of like superimposing photographs over one another, where it's not so literal. It can mean multiple things to multiple people, the meaning of the song. So it's actually somewhat easier. It's funner in a way. Whereas writing, obviously, it's not to sound stupid, but it's literal. Like, it's more concrete and focused, and they're two different disciplines, like totally different. People often ask me, about they kind of blur the two in together, and it's almost like being one's a marathon runner and the other is like a deep sea diver. They're just two different beasts. And there is some overlap, maybe just in the having a command of the language. But I love them both. But I find doing books is pretty. It takes a different kind of discipline. It's a lonely, solitary pursuit.
Yeah, we should end on that note. But yeah. But you can see your musical ear play, it shows in your prose, and just beautiful language, and how your chapters, this isn't the right way to describe it, but they kind of deteriorate into poetry, right? They, just the frustration, the craziness, everything breaks it down, and the line breaks come in, and it's perfect how that works. The emphasis that shows on it. And I couldn't help thinking, as I was reading this, that like, if this had gone through the MFA program workshop world, somebody would have told you not to do that. Somebody, don't do that. Yeah. And it's it's perfect. It's exactly what you should have done. And it is quite an experience. I look forward to the end of every chapter.
That brings up a killer subject, because the book was initially, the way I'd written it was in really like the line breaks. The whole thing looked like poetry, everything. And what I had trouble with was getting the dialogue in those short line breaks, and it just didn't look good on the page. So I had to kind of develop a hybrid, which was also suggested to me by my publisher, UL Press. They suggested, hey, why don't you kind of try this? And they kind of wanted more paragraph form. I was like, let me work on it and find a nice middle ground. And I actually think it worked better too, because I just didn't like the way just even visually, it was hard to keep long blocks of dialogue looking good in a short, prosy looking line break. But yeah, it does devolve into poetry sometimes, or evolve. I don't know what it is, but sometimes the content's so shocking, or it's imprinting itself on you, that was my reaction. It's like, the only way I can describe this is in sometimes abstract terms, without being trite or belittling it. And there's many sections, there's a lot of prose I did cut out, because it went a little rambly. Not like I don't ramble in the book, but I like how the prose sections kind of slip in there, between the concrete episodes of just kind of hardcore reality. And then it goes into this kind of dreamy, foggy, early morning ambient scape of humanity and where I am, where you're parked in a parking lot at 3 a.m. and you hear the hum of the city in the distance of just air conditioners and machines and just things kind of purring in the background. There's a lot of that in the book, which honestly, some of that's my favorite stuff,
Well, I couldn't have been more impressed. I think we probably put in our hour today.
Yeah,
I guess
great.
we just have to stop this ourselves at some point, but I couldn't recommend your book more highly. So Cablog, anybody out there watching it, please give this, read this book. You'll enjoy it. It's funny, it's bittersweet as it comes, and it's raunchy at times, and it's not cab driving, so it's filthy at times.
I think it's a good.
I guess.
I think it's a good book for even people that don't like to read. That I've had some friends of mine that have bought it for their husbands who haven't read a book in 15 years, and they'll read it in 3 days. So yeah, I really appreciate you devoting the time for this interview, Lee. I'd love to meet you one day. You're not that far away from me, man. So I'd be willing to take you out to dinner and just continue this conversation, talk some shop next time. I
love that, man. That'd be great.
If you're in Oxford, man, I'll get in touch with you, and I'd love to do that. I love meeting more like-minded people. Fantastic.
All right, let's do that. And thank you to the book conference, Louisiana Book Conference, for doing this for us. And it's been fun.
Thank you for watching this presentation of the virtual 2021 Louisiana Book Festival. Please visit our official bookseller, Cavalier House Books, and receive 20% off all featured festival titles through the end of the year. A special thank you to our festival sponsors. The Louisiana Book Festival will return on October 29th, 2022.